What if the energy relationship between the United States and Canada could be disrupted? How would this affect the power grids in the US? Within a day of assuming office, President Donald Trump made a bold and unexpected announcement. He revealed his intention to impose a 25% tariff on every import from Canada. For years, many parts of the US have quietly relied on Canadian electricity to help maintain the stability of their power grids. This long-standing energy arrangement, however, was now under scrutiny as tensions between the two countries escalated. As new economic pressures emerged, Canada began reassessing its role as a primary energy supplier to the US. If diplomatic efforts failed, the possibility of restricting electricity exports remained a serious consideration, one that could result in significant disruptions across the US economy and its power supply. This dispute began in late 2024 during a private gathering at Mar-a-Lago where President Trump, recently re-elected for his second presidential term, made a surprising remark. Among a group of world leaders and influential business figures, Trump suggested that Canada would benefit from becoming the 51st state of the United States. Initially, this seemed like an offhand comment, a momentary suggestion from the president. That was quickly dismissed. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, attending the event, responded with a reserved diplomatic smile, likely hoping the conversation would fade without consequence. However, Trump persisted, elaborating on the idea further, claiming that Canadian citizens would benefit from lower taxes and improved healthcare under American governance. While his statement was met with polite amusement at the dinner table, it raised questions. Was this simply political rhetoric, or did Trump have more serious intentions? A few days later, on December 10th, Trump revisited the topic on his Truth Social platform, referring to Trudeau not as the Prime Minister of Canada, but as Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. This remark gained traction online quickly, sparking widespread speculation and debate. Some dismissed it as another deliberate provocation, while others began to wonder whether it signaled a shift in US foreign policy, as social media platforms exploded with discussions ranging from humorous mockery to serious geopolitical analysis. Major news outlets picked up the story, questioning if this was an actual policy stance or just another of Trump's well-known exaggerations. Despite the immediate and intense reaction, the Canadian government largely refrained from commenting, choosing not to escalate the situation further. It seemed like the matter might fade from public view. However, on December 18th, Trump again stirred the pot by claiming that a significant number of Canadians were in favor of closer integration with the United States. No data or surveys were provided to support this claim, but it rapidly gained traction among Trump's supporters, further fueling speculation. In Canada, the claim was met with skepticism and dismissal, with political leaders and citizens alike rejecting the notion as unrealistic. By early January 2025, the situation took a sharp turn. Trump announced that he would impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports. He justified this move by claiming that Canada's border security measures were insufficient, arguing that the US was effectively subsidizing Canada through trade imbalances. The economic impact of such a tariff would be substantial, affecting key Canadian exports such as lumber, steel, and agricultural products. The announcement on January 7th prompted a quick response from Prime Minister Trudeau, who firmly rejected the idea of Canada becoming part of the US. In a press conference, Trudeau declared, "There isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever become part of the United States," making it clear that this proposal had no ground in Canadian politics. Trump, however, chose to intensify his rhetoric. On December 25th, he repeated his claims on Truth Social, once again asserting that Canadian citizens would benefit economically and militarily if they agreed to closer integration with the US. He framed the argument as an economic opportunity, suggesting that taxes would decrease, business opportunities would expand, and national security would be strengthened. But despite his repeated attempts, these arguments did little to change the official stance of the Canadian government. On February 1st, Trump formalized his economic strategy, signing the executive order to impose the 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, with the measure set to take effect on February 4th. This shift from rhetoric to concrete economic action introduced immediate consequences for businesses and consumers in both countries. In response, the Canadian government wasted no time in retaliating. On February 2nd, The Trudeau administration announced a series of retaliatory measures, including tariffs targeting $155 billion worth of American imports. This counterattack was calculated to affect key sectors of the U.S. economy, ensuring that the economic burden was felt both in Washington and in Ottawa. But Canada's response was not limited to tariffs. Canadian officials began considering additional measures to assert their economic independence from the United States. One of the most impactful options under consideration was to reassess U.S. access to Canadian energy resources. The United States relies heavily on Canada for oil, natural gas, and hydroelectric power. If Canada were to restrict or reallocate these resources, the economic consequences for the US could be severe as the tensions continued to build. Ontario Premier Doug Ford suggested that his province might suspend electricity exports to several US states, including Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This was not an idle threat. Approximately 1.5 million Americans depend on Canadian-generated electricity, and any disruption to that supply could cause widespread consequences. The potential for power shortages in these regions added urgency to the situation, underscoring the deep interdependence between the two countries in the energy sector. This growing conflict highlighted just how much the US has come to rely on Canadian resources. While the US boasts a larger economy and military, Canada holds strategic leverage in industries like energy, which are crucial to the functioning of the American economy. The possibility of Canada reducing its economic dependence on the US and forging stronger trade relationships with other global partners only added complexity to the issue. The decisions made in the coming months could reshape the trajectory of US-Canada relations for years to come. By February 2025, it became clear that the long-standing economic ties between the two nations were being tested like never before. For decades, Canada had been a stable and reliable economic partner to the US, but the events of early 2025 proved that this relationship could no longer be taken for granted. As both sides dug in, the question shifted. Would Canada remain a key supplier to the US? And if so, under what terms? If tensions continued, there was a real possibility that these once strong economic bonds could be permanently altered. Conclusion: the unfolding trade conflict between the US and Canada highlights the fragility of international relations in an increasingly complex global economy. The tariffs and economic pressure imposed by the US have forced Canada to reassess its priorities, and the potential disruption of energy supplies has only escalated the situation. Whether this conflict can be resolved through diplomatic negotiations, or whether it will lead to lasting shifts in global trade dynamics, remains to be seen. However, one thing is certain: the outcome will significantly shape the future of US-Canada relations and the broader North American economic landscape.